Hello, everyone, and welcome to week four of VF804. And I just continue to really enjoy engaging you all in your discussion point posts. And just so grateful for your thoughtfulness and your engagement in these very, at times, provocative questions and topics that we discuss throughout this course. And as I reflect on some of your posts, I am reflecting on um, many people's sharing of collective trauma experiences, in various contexts, including the ministry context, and how at times that can lead to decisions that are made that may end up causing even further pain towards oneself, themselves, and also towards others. Um, I'm also reflecting on comments about systemic patterns, for example, in ministry contexts that may contribute to trauma, the ongoingness of trauma, and things like abuse within church and ministry contexts, and the calls for structural and cultural change. And my hope is that that trauma-informed care paper that we'll be writing together this quarter can be uh, a step in that direction. When one of the themes that I continually reflect on the topic of trauma is that it can produce very different fruit in different individuals. So, for example, conditions like narcissistic personality disorder have in their etiology usually childhood trauma. So if you have ever worked with a leader with narcissistic personality disorder, it's usually the case that they have developed that kind of perspective of relating to themselves and others in the world, likely as a defense, as a way of protecting oneself in the face of childhood trauma. And on the other side, when the pain of trauma is metabolized well through things like grief and lament and the giving and receiving of support from trusted friends and the work of the Holy Spirit, it can actually enlarge one's heart. It can actually lead people to be in greater touch with their own humanity and in greater touch with the humanity of others. And that's one of the many reasons why I feel like, addressing one of the questions from last week, discussion questions from last week, why there's so many of us in the ministry that have trauma histories. I think that heart to serve and care for others can very well be some of the goodness and the beauty that came out of an otherwise horrible, tragic situation. And even when there's beauty that comes out of trauma, even when there's growth that comes out of trauma, it never justifies the original trauma. The beauty and the brokenness always coexist side by side. And towards the when I work with trauma survivors, whether it's within the context of pastoral ministry or in my clinical psychotherapy work, oftentimes when I reach towards the end of my trauma work with different trauma survivors, when some of the psychological symptoms begin to subside, and usually they never completely disappear, but it is possible for them to subside over time. Our conversations often turn existential, and the themes that emerge, I feel, are captured well by five essential truths that uh, Richard Rohr talks about. These five essential truths that Richard Rohr talks about are truths, as he describes it, are truths to which we are to awaken to if we are to grow up in our faith. And incidentally, these are also truths that uh, traumas provide an opportunity for us to face. And the five essential truths that Richard Rohr talks about are the following. The first of which is that uh, life is hard. The second is you are not that important. The third is that your life is not about you. And the fourth is you are not in control. And the fifth is you are going to die. Um, there's a lot. I feel ambivalence with those five, those five truths, but I am comfortable acknowledging them as truths, although I think we can certainly add critical thinking and nuance to each of them. And again, I feel like trauma does have a way of providing us an opportunity to not only confront these truths, but um, to do the inner work of making peace with each of these truths. And in doing so, they may in fact shape and form how we are to pursue a life well lived. This week, we're going to continue our conversation and exploration into the topic of trauma by exploring how trauma exposure of the indirect sort, so being exposed to the traumas of others, how that might shape not only our emotional or relational life, but also our spiritual and vocational calling as well. Our readings for this week, again, are going to be very modest, just two short articles. And they're going to introduce the topic of secondary trauma and vicarious trauma. And I'm hoping to, in doing so, I'm hoping to provide some language and a framework to articulate and understand how indirect exposure to trauma, to the trauma of others, might actually impact the one who's trying to help, the one who's seeking to, in a position to listen, to bear witness, and to accompany others in their suffering. And in the other paper, we're going to consider in more depth. I'm going to jump into um, some of the biblical passages surrounding Christ's death and some of the accounts soon after his resurrection and the implications and explore the implications of all of this on the Christian life. And accordingly, the prompts for our discussion posts this week will include the following. The first, in what ways have you observed or noticed the impact of indirect exposure to trauma? Or, in other words, how bearing witness to someone else's trauma might actually impact you. The second question is, how do you understand what are your reactions to how the resurrected Christ, how he still has scars on his body? What are the potential implications of this on those of us who are in ministry? And what are the implications of this on the Christian life as a whole? And then finally, in what ways might trauma or emotional pain shape one's vocational calling? And this can be from your own experience or what you've observed in others. And as always, feel free to engage and to share only that which you feel comfortable and safe sharing. None of this, the degree to which you share, does not impact your grade whatsoever. And to whatever extent you share, I consider it a gift, and it's a gift that I don't take for granted, and I'm grateful for. Thank you, and hope you all have a wonderful week.